civilizations rise not only with the clash of swords or the flourish of temples, but in quiet rituals, in fields of grain, and in cities carved from silence. In this next passage of forgotten time, we step into ruins once alive with prayers and power, yet now shrouded in vines, dust, and memory. From the jungle-wrapped towers of Angkor to earthen pyramids beneath American skies, to wind-blown stones of Sardinia, to the granite echoes of a forgotten African empire, and finally, to the world's most remote island, where statues gaze inland with ancient eyes. This is a journey through the last breath of greatness. The fall of cities, the migration of people, the hum of history beneath layers of soil. Let us walk together deeper into what was almost lost. In the humid jungles and rice paddies of Southeast Asia lie the remains of one of the medieval world's most splendid civilizations, the Khmer Empire of Cambodia. This empire, which lasted roughly from the 9th to the 15th century AD, reached its zenith in the city of Angkor, near the modern town of Siem Reap. Angkor was not just one city, but a whole complex of cities, temples and reservoirs, spread across the landscape at its height around the 12th-13th centuries. The Angkor region supported a population that recent scholars estimate might have been close to 1 million people, making it arguably the largest urban agglomeration of the pre-industrial world. The crown jewel of Angkor is Angkor Wat, the largest religious monument on earth, a sandstone temple mountain built in the early 12th century by King Suryavarman II. To behold Angkor Wat at dawn, with its 5 lotus-like towers silhouetted against a pink sky and reflected in a broad moat, is to witness a scene of profound tranquility and grandeur. This temple, dedicated originally to the Hindu god Vishnu and later used for Buddhist worship, is adorned with thousands of feet of exquisite bas-relief carvings, armies of warriors, celestial dancing nymphs, epic battles of gods and demons, a stone tapestry of Khmer cosmology and court life. Angkor Wat is but one of many structures. The Khmer kings built numerous temples. Bayon, at the heart of Angkor Thom, the royal city, with its 54 towers each bearing gigantic serene faces, gazing out over the cardinal directions. Tapra Phrum, where twisted tree roots strangle grey walls and carved devatas, goddesses, peer out from moss. Priya Kung, Bante, Srey, and others, each with its unique artistry. The engineering achievements of the Khmer were equally impressive. They constructed vast barrays, reservoirs. The West Baray and East Baray are each several kilometers long, and a network of canals and moats, forming a complex hydraulic city. This system captured and distributed water from the Siem Reap River and monsoon rains, enabling rice agriculture on a scale and reliability unprecedented in the region. Water was the lifeblood of Angkor. It allowed the land to yield multiple rice harvests a year, feeding a huge population and freeing labor for temple construction and other arts. The Khmer Empire was powerful. Under kings like Suryavarman II and Jayavarman VII, it extended its influence over much of mainland Southeast Asia, encompassing present-day Cambodia, Thailand, Laos and southern Vietnam. Jayavarman VII, late 12th, early 13th century, was especially notable. A devout Buddhist king, he built the Bayon and many other temples, and also hospitals and rest houses along roads, an early form of public welfare. One imagines Angkor in that era as a lively metropolis, streets filled with officials in silk, monks in saffron robes, foreign traders from China or India, leading ox carts with wares, elephants swinging along bearing the king's edicts, and everywhere the sound of construction, chiseling of stone, creaking of wooden cranes, chanting of workers given the scale of projects. Yet for all its might, Angkor did not last. The decline of the Khmer Empire came in the 14th and 15th centuries through a combination of environmental strain and external pressures. One major factor was climate change, specifically a pattern of intense droughts punctuated by heavy monsoon floods. Tree ring data and sediment studies in Cambodia show that the region experienced several severe drought periods in the 14th century, each lasting years, then sudden deluges of rainfall. The sophisticated water infrastructure of Angkor was designed for a relatively stable climate. It struggled under these extremes. During droughts, the reservoirs would have dwindled, crops failed, and drinking water grown scarce. The Khmer likely dug deeper canals and tried to expand their system. Some unfinished projects from this late period have been identified, but it may not have been enough. Then, when the rains returned furiously, the sudden floodwaters broke through the weakened infrastructure. Archaeological evidence shows that channels and bridges were damaged by massive floods. One crumbling bridge, with water surge marks, stands as a mute testament to a monsoon that overwhelmed Angkor, Tom's Canal. The damage to the hydraulic network would have been devastating. Without reliable irrigation, the rice fields could not support the huge population, leading to food shortages and possibly social upheaval. Farmers might abandon the city for more fertile regions. At the same time, the Khmer Empire's political and military strength waned. Rival kingdoms, especially the rising Thai kingdom of Ayutthaya to the west, pressed in. In 1431 AD, Ayutthaya's armies are traditionally said to have captured Angkor after a protracted siege, marking a symbolic end of the Angkorian period. It's possible that by then, Angkor was already weakened from within, perhaps partially depopulated by the environmental crises. The Thai invasion may have been the final blow, or even more of a takeover of an already declining city. After 1431, the Khmer court moved south, nearer to today's Phnom Penh, and Angkor was largely abandoned, save for some monasteries that still cared for Angkor Wat, which was never completely forgotten. Unlike Petra or Machu Picchu, Cambodian and foreign visitors, including a Portuguese friar in the 16th century, still knew of Angkor's existence, but the metropolis, the beating heart of the empire, was gone. Over succeeding centuries, the jungle cloaked many of the temples. Trees and vines worked their slow destruction, toppling towers and prying stones apart. Locals still lived in the area, a small village here or there, but nothing like the urban glory of old. By the time French explorers rediscovered Angkor in the 19th century, guided by Cambodian monks and villagers, they found a landscape of romantically ruined temples, some maintained as active Buddhist pagodas, others swallowed by kapuk trees. Henry Mouhot's writings in the 1860s, describing Angkor as grander than anything left to us by Greece or Rome, captivated the Western world. Today, after much restoration, Angkor's key sites are stable and draw visitors from around the globe. But if you stray just a bit off the beaten path amid the vast Angkor Archaeological Park, you can find yourself utterly alone with the ruins. Perhaps you step through a Gopura gate into an overgrown courtyard, the carvings of Apsara's heavenly dancers smiling faintly from the walls. The air is thick and warm, filled with the sound of cicadas. A few orange-robed monks may shuffle by, a gecko chirps. There is a peaceful, almost gentle atmosphere. Unlike some collapses marked by violence, Angkor's decline feels gradual. Angkor Wat was never destroyed. It was cared for continuously by Buddhists, which is why it stands so intact. Angkor Thom's fall was more disruptive, yet what we sense now is a city that slowly exhaled its human life and let the forest resume custody. As night descends on Angkor, the silhouettes of temple towers merge with treetops. Fireflies blink above ancient moat waters. It's easy to drift into reverie and imagine you hear faint music from a royal procession, or the laughter of girls bathing by torchlight on the edges of the Bari, or the distant gong of a temple bell calling the faithful. Then a nightbird calls, and you awaken to the quiet present. Angkor's people moved on, their capital shifted and their empire shrank, but the Khmer nation persisted, and so did their cultural brilliance in new forms. The lost city became part of nature's dream. In our dreams it still stands, a harmonious blend of human devotion and the tropical earth, a gentle echo of glory, fading into green. We leave the entwined stones and roots of Angkor and travel now to another continent and another monumental site, reclaimed by nature. Across the world, in the heartland of North America, an ancient city of the Mississippi River basin rose and fell centuries ago, leaving only earthen mounds as its silent witnesses. Let us walk the grassy mounds of Cahokia, the center of the Mississippian culture, and listen for the whispers of its forgotten people. On a plain east of the Great Mississippi River, just a few miles from where the modern city of St. Louis stands, lie dozens of enormous earth mounds, the last remains of an indigenous city that thrived 1,000 years ago. This site is known today as Cahokia, and it was the principal city of what we call the Mississippian culture, which spread across much of the eastern United States from roughly 800 to 1500 AD. Cahokia in its prime, 100 AD, was the largest urban center north of Mesoamerica. It spanned 5 to 6 square miles and had a population of perhaps 15,000 in the city proper and up to 20–30,000 in the metropolitan area. That would make it comparable in size to medieval European cities like London or Paris around the same period. It's an astonishing fact that around 1100 AD, one of the biggest cities in the world was not in Europe, Asia or Africa, but on the rich floodplain of the Mississippi, built by the ancestors of today's Native American nations. Cahokia's most prominent feature is Monk's Mound, a colossal earthen pyramid that still towers about 30 meters high and has a base larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was constructed basket-load of soil at a time, a monumental achievement of communal labor. Atop this mound likely stood a large wooden building, perhaps a temple, or the residence of the paramount chief, sometimes called the Great Sun, or Birdman, in interpretations of Cahokian iconography. Around Monk's Mound were plazas, and dozens of smaller mounds, some of which served as substructures for buildings and others as burial mounds for elites. Archaeologists have unearthed evidence of a complex society, stockades, fortification walls that were built and rebuilt, suggesting the city had defensive needs, specialized workshops for making tools and ornaments, and exotic trade items, indicating long-distance connections, Gulf Coast seashells, Great Lakes, copper, Appalachian mica, and more. Cahokians practiced a form of intensive agriculture centered on maize corn cultivation. Agriculture supported the large population and the social stratification. There were clearly powerful leaders or priests, as indicated by the lavish grave goods in some burials, including one famously dubbed Birdman burial, with thousands of shell beads laid out in the shape of a falcon. They also had a vibrant religious ritual life. One of the intriguing structures found at Cahokia is the so-called woodhenge, circles of large cedar posts, seemingly aligned to solar events, like solstices and equinoxes. The woodhenge at Cahokia, reconstructed today with red posts, likely served as a calendar or ceremonial space where the Cahokians could mark seasonal change and hold festivals. One can imagine the community gathering in the pre-dawn hush on the equinox, the chief or priest standing at a specific post, waiting for the sun to rise aligned with another post on the horizon, and as the first light appears, a great cheer or chant arising from the people. These rituals would reinforce social cohesion and the cosmological beliefs that underpinned Cahokia's society. However, like so many urban civilizations, Cahokia did not last indefinitely. By 1200 AD, signs of strain appeared, and over the next century or so, the city underwent decline. By 1350 AD, Cahokia was largely abandoned. When European explorers later came through the region in the 16th and 17th centuries, they found no cities, only scattered villages and tribes, with oral histories that might echo the memory of places like Cahokia. Why did Cahokia collapse? This is an area of ongoing research and debate. Several likely factors are considered. Environmental degradation is one. Evidence suggests the Cahokians heavily logged the forests for fuel, construction, and to clear land. Trees cut from nearby uplands could have led to erosion. Some have hypothesized that massive flooding could have occurred as a result, damaging crops and swamping parts of the city. But recent geoarchaeological studies complicate that picture, finding that while deforestation happened, catastrophic flooding evidence is scant at key times. Another factor strongly supported by data is climate change. Around the time of Cahokia's decline, 1200 to 1400 AD, there were episodes of prolonged drought in the mid-continental US, part of the transition to the Little Ice Age. Maize agriculture would have suffered greatly during multi-year droughts, leading to malnutrition and conflict. Indeed, some signs of nutritional stress and violence have been observed in late Cahokian burials. There's also evidence of social turmoil. The fact that Cahokia built and rebuilt palisade walls around its central precinct multiple times suggests rising conflict or fear of attack. Perhaps internal factions fought, or subject peoples around Cahokia, who provided labor and tribute, rebelled, causing instability. Archaeologists have found arrowheads embedded in some structures, hinting at warfare. Additionally, disease vectors may have increased as population density did, though this was pre-Columbian before European diseases. Endemic illnesses or sanitation issues could have played a role in weakening the populace. The decline likely wasn't a single cataclysm, but a combination of stresses, environmental, climatic, social. People might have gradually decided that life was better elsewhere, so they emigrated, streaming away from Cahokia over years and decades, heading to smaller settlements that could sustain them. By the time a truly devastating drought hit around the mid-14th century, as climate records indicate, there may not have been many folks left in the city at all. Thus, the great earthen mounds were left to stand vigil over an empty plaza. Grasses grew over the temple mounds, the post circles rotted away, the wooden houses and palisades decayed back into the soil, leaving only subtle stains. Successor cultures, like the late prehistoric and proto-historic tribes encountered by Europeans, the Illinois for instance, possibly knew these sites as ancient and sacred places, but no written record from them survives to explain what they believed about them. Early Euro-American settlers in the 18th-19th centuries were astonished to find what looked like man-made hills and assumed a lost race of mound builders, separate from Native Americans, must have constructed them, a misconception that endured until the mid-19th century, when it was finally acknowledged that these were the work of indigenous people's ancestors. To stand atop Monk's Mound today and gaze over the flat Mississippi floodplain is a moving experience. In summer, the sound of cicadas rises in waves. The modern city's skyline is visible in the distance, but around the mound itself, there is quiet, park-like open space. Scattered about are other lower mounds, now just gentle hills of earth, covered in meadow flowers. You can almost see in your mind's eye the ghosts of a civilization, plazas filled with families, smoke curling from thatched rooftops at dusk, processions ascending the great mound with torches at night, and perhaps the distant rhythm of drums carrying on the wind. Then blink, and it's gone, replaced by the hum of crickets and a lone hawk circling the sky. Cahokia's story is a reminder that urban life is not solely a Eurasian experience. Humans everywhere have proven capable of organization and ingenuity, building cities suited to their environment. It's also a reminder that even without written chronicles, a vanished city can speak volumes. In the end, the people of Cahokia did not vanish entirely. Their descendants survived in the many Native American nations that followed. But the urban way of life here did vanish, and by the time history as written by Europeans came, the very memory of Cahokia's existence had faded from native lore, or at least was not recognized by outsiders. We, who visit now, are left to interpret the mute earthen monuments. In the gentle breeze at twilight, with the sun's last rays glinting off the slopes of Monk's Mound, it's easy to let the imagination populate the scene with those who came before. A sense of calm pervades. These mounds have slumbered for centuries. The chaos and hardship that likely marked Cahokia's final years are over, healed by time. All that remains is the earth, carefully shaped by human hands long ago, and the knowledge, slowly regained by archaeologists, that here once stood a great city, one that rose with hope and ambition, and fell as circumstances turned, leaving behind only the silent ground to remember it. The mounds of Cahokia are enduring yet humble markers of a lost city. We next cross the Atlantic back to the Old World, to an island where mysterious stone towers dot the landscape, relics of a culture that never wrote its name. On the Mediterranean island of Sardinia, the Nuragic civilization created thousands of stone Nuragic and then faded into history's twilight. Let us visit Sardinia's Nuragic and consider the fate of this enigmatic people. Scattered across the rugged, sun-drenched landscapes of Sardinia, from coastal plains to rocky highlands, stand mysterious beehive-shaped stone towers called Nuragic. Over 7,000 of these ancient towers are known, giving Sardinia a uniquely prehistoric skyline, unlike anywhere else on Earth. They are the legacy of the Nuragic civilization, which arose in the Bronze Age, around 1800 BCE, and lasted through the Iron Age, until the Roman conquest of Sardinia in the late 3rd century BCE. The Nuragic people did not leave behind written records. Their language remains unknown, perhaps a non-Indo-European tongue, or a very early relative of languages later spoken in the region. So everything we know comes from archaeology, the scant mentions by outsiders, and later folklore. The Nuragic, singular of Nuragi, typically consists of a truncated conical tower made of large blocks of stone, carefully stacked without mortar. They often have an internal chamber, usually beehive-like, corbel vaulted, and small slit windows. Some Nuragi stand alone, others are part of more complex structures with multiple towers linked by walls, forming what look like fortress villages. The largest, such as Su Nuragic, Di Barumini, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, have central towers originally over 15 meters tall, surrounded by several smaller towers and a defensive rampart, a veritable stronghold of stone. It is awe-inspiring to walk among these ruins and consider that they were built more than 3,000 years ago with no cranes or mortar, just human muscle, ingenuity, and perhaps wood-leveraged technologies. The precisely placed basalt and limestone blocks have weathered millennia of wind and quake. When you step into a Nuragic's central chamber, the temperature drops slightly and a hush falls. A shaft of light from a high entrance might illuminate the perfectly arched dome of rocks overhead, each course cantilevered inward. It feels like a space built by giants or master masons, yet done in an age before written calculations, a testament to skill passed by practice and tradition. Why did the Nuragic Sardinians build these towers? Theories abound. Their sheer number and distribution, covering the entire island, indicate they were central to Nuragic life. They may have been fortifications, signaling a time of conflict and need for defense. Perhaps the Nuragic tribes were frequently at war with each other, or fending off outside threats. The towers, often placed on hilltops or strategic points, would make effective lookout posts overseeing valleys and coastlines. Some may have been status symbols or dwellings of chieftains, sturdy homes for the local elite that doubled as refuges in case of attack. Others might have served ritual purposes or community granaries. Likely, over their long period of use, many Nuragic show evidence of centuries of occupation and modification. They played multiple roles. The Nuragic people also left behind fascinating bronze figurines, bronzetti, depicting warriors with horned helmets, women, animals, and boats, which give a glimpse into their life and beliefs. These come mostly from the Iron Age, after 900 BCE, and show, for example, archers and soldiers that suggest a martial society, but also everyday scenes and possibly deities. One famous site, Santuario di Santa Cristina, features a sacred well, an underground stone well, with a beautifully carved stairway that descends to water, likely used for ritual purification or star observations. Its structure aligns with certain lunar standstill events. Such sophistication hints that the Nuragic people had a rich ceremonial life tied perhaps to water and astral cycles. As the Iron Age progressed, Sardinia increasingly came into contact with other Mediterranean civilizations. The Phoenicians, and later Carthaginians, established trading posts on Sardinian coasts in the first millennium BCE. They sought metals. Sardinia had copper and lead, and possibly iron. The Nuragic people engaged in trade. Archaeologists find Nuragic ceramics and bronzes in Etruscan Italy and elsewhere, and foreign goods in Sardinia. Over time, this contact became domination. Carthage conquered parts of Sardinia in the 6th century BCE, and then Rome took the entire island from Carthage in 20. It's likely that by the time of the Roman conquest, the Nuragic way of life had already transformed under Carthaginian influence. Coastal Nuragic settlements might have been under Punic rule, while interior highland clans held to old ways a bit longer. The Romans mentioned the Ilean Bellari, tribes in Sardinia's interior, who resisted Roman rule fiercely, possibly direct descendants of the Nuragic folk, still clinging to the mountains and their towers. Eventually, of course, Rome subdued the whole island. Latin language and Roman culture spread, and the distinct Nuragic culture dissipated, absorbed into Roman Sardinia. Thus, the Nuragic civilization vanished, not in an abrupt cataclysm, but through a slow process of colonization and cultural blending. Their stone towers outlasted them, becoming silent ruins, In later Sardinian folklore, these Nuragi were sometimes attributed to mythic beings. Some locals believed they were built by giants or by an ancient vanished people. Indeed, one Sardinian legend speaks of a race of giants who once lived there, and interestingly, excavations at some Nuragi have uncovered very large burial tombs known as tombs of the giants, communal graves that fueled such tales. But the real Nuragic people, though not giants, achieved giant feats of engineering for their time. Imagine Sardinia around 1000 BCE. On a hilltop, a Nuragic's brazier fire flickers at dusk as villagers bring in their sheep and goats. The chief, draped in woven wool and bronze ornaments, stands atop the tower watching over his domain, perhaps contemplating if distant smoke signals friend or foe. Below, round huts of stone and thatch cluster around the Nuragic, the air smelling of wood smoke and salted meat. Now fast forward to 500 BCE. A Phoenician trader arrives in a nearby coastal village with colorful beads and wine in exchange for local metals. The world is changing. New weapons, new diseases, new alliances. Some Nuragic are maintained, others fall into disuse as people gravitate toward the coastal trade hubs or new forms of housing. By the Roman era, many towers are abandoned. A few might still be occupied by rebels or shepherds, but gradually even those are left behind as Rome's order extends and new stone buildings, Roman villas and roads appear. Over centuries, the Nuragic collapsed, bit by bit. Some stones were taken to build farms and villages in medieval times. Others remained, half crumbled but steadfast. Today, farmers plow fields around them. One might serve as a shed or a makeshift corral. Many, though, sit lonely on wild lands, visited mainly by curious travelers, archaeologists, and the occasional grazing sheep seeking shade against its weathered stones. Visiting a Nuragic, like Nuragic, Lozo, or La Juno, on a quiet day, one often has the site entirely to oneself. The Sardinian sun is warm. The only sounds are wind rustling the scrub and distant cowbells. Climbing into the ancient tower, you feel the temperature drop and see lizards scuttle on the stones. It's easy to wonder about the countless lives that passed through here. Births, feasts, councils of war, moments of prayer to forgotten gods. All between these thick walls, now there's just silence. The people who built it are gone beyond recall. Even their name for themselves is unknown. We call them Nuragic after their structures, but they left an indelible mark on Sardinia's identity. Sardinians today, though speaking Italian or their own Romance dialect and practicing modern lifestyles, still feel a connection to these mysterious ruins dotting their homeland. Perhaps at dusk, if you sit by a Nuragic's entrance, you might catch a whisper of wind that sounds like voices. Could it be the old ones, speaking in a tongue lost to time, only imagination? A herdsman leads his flock home in the distance, much as might have been done 3,000 years ago. In the twilight, the Nuragic stands dark against the orange sky, an enduring silhouette. The Nuragic civilization has long faded, subsumed by history's tides, but the stones they placed remain, patient, immovable, and eloquent in their mystery. We listen, and in our gentle pondering of their fate, we honor those unknown ancestors of Sardinia. Leaving the windswept Nuragic behind, our path now takes us to the high plateau of southern Africa, where a maze of stone walls once formed a grand city of the Shona people. This is Great Zimbabwe, a place of kings and cattle, gold and stone, whose story was nearly erased in colonial times, but now stands recognized as a symbol of African heritage. Let us wander among Great Zimbabwe's ancient walls and hear the echoes of its lost kingdom. In the rolling hills of southeastern Zimbabwe, amid acacia trees and tall grass, rise the majestic stone ruins of Great Zimbabwe, the largest pre-colonial structure south of the Sahara, and the center of a powerful African kingdom in the Middle Ages. The word Zimbabwe comes from the Shona phrase Dzimba da Zimbabwe, meaning houses of stone, and indeed Great Zimbabwe is an extraordinary city of stone walls, built entirely without mortar. The most imposing of these walls form the Great Enclosure, an elliptical structure over 250 meters in circumference. Its outer walls stand up to 11 meters high and 6 meters thick, constructed from tens of thousands of granite blocks, expertly cut and stacked in tight courses. Within the great enclosure, one finds smaller passages and a famous conical tower, about 9 meters tall. The purpose of this solid tower remains a mystery, perhaps a symbol of royal authority or a granary emblem to signify abundance. On a nearby hill dominating the site are the hill ruins, a series of stone-walled compounds and terraces that likely served as the royal acropolis or temple area. From that height, one can survey the whole valley, imagining it teeming with life. Thousands of huts, made of mud brick or daga thatch, sprawled across the slopes, livestock pens and the smoke from iron smelting furnaces rising into the African sky. Great Zimbabwe was occupied and in its prime between roughly 1100 and 1450 AD. At its height, it's estimated to have housed up to 15,000 to 20,000 people, making it one of the largest cities of its time in Africa. It was the capital of a kingdom that controlled trade routes and resources in the region. Archaeological finds at Great Zimbabwe include Chinese porcelain, Persian glass beads, and Arabian coins, revealing that it was part of extensive trade networks reaching the Swahili coast and beyond. The wealth of Great Zimbabwe was built on cattle, the main form of wealth and food, crops like sorghum and millet, and critically, gold. The surrounding plateau is rich in gold deposits. The people of Great Zimbabwe mined gold and ivory from elephant hunting and traded these via river and overland routes to merchants on the Mozambique coast, such as those from Kilwa and Sofala. In return, they received exotic luxuries, colorful glass beads, glazed ceramics from Asia, fine cloth. This prosperity allowed the rise of a ruling elite, likely an early Shona dynasty, that could commission large-scale building. The dry stone architecture technique was a local innovation. Earlier, smaller-scale stone enclosures in the region prefigure what was achieved at Great Zimbabwe, but never on this scale. One imagines a succession of kings, or wine, possibly semi-divine in Shona culture, living atop the hill complex and presiding over ceremonies and the distribution of goods. Commoners lived in huts outside the stone compounds, but the craftsmanship of the walls suggests a highly skilled labor force and social organization to support them. Great Zimbabwe, in its heyday, must have been impressive, shining granite walls in the noonday sun, bustling markets with goods from distant lands, rich fields of grain around, and herds of cattle lowing in pens. The decline of Great Zimbabwe came in the 15th century. By around 1450, the site was largely abandoned. Why did this happen? Scholars believe that a combination of factors played a role. Environmental stress is one. The land around Great Zimbabwe may have been overutilized, overgrazing by the huge cattle herds, and deforestation for construction and firewood could have led to soil depletion. Additionally, climate fluctuations might have induced drought periods, making it hard to sustain the large population. Another major factor was a shift in trade. In the 15th century, new gold fields farther north, near modern Mozambique, Zimbabwe border, began to be exploited and new trade routes opened, leading to the ascendance of other powers like the Mutapa state, Mutapa. As trade focus moved, Great Zimbabwe lost its economic primacy. Political instability may have followed, possibly disputes over succession or a weakening of central authority, as provinces broke away to control the new gold routes. By the time the Portuguese began exploring the East African coast in the early 1500s, Great Zimbabwe was an echo. They heard tales of a great inland city of stone, but it was no longer inhabited at a grand scale. However, the site was never completely forgotten locally. It remained a venerated place, likely part of oral histories of the Shona as a city of ancestors. When European colonizers, explorers, hunters, etc. came upon Great Zimbabwe in the late 19th century, they were astonished by its scale and sophistication. Tragically, due to the racism of that era, many refused to believe it could have been built by native Africans. Instead, fantastical theories arose. Some claimed it was built by the Queen of Sheba, or by Phoenicians, or other Old World civilizations. These claims were not based on evidence, but on biases. In the early 20th century, Excavations by colonial authorities even deliberately ignored or destroyed evidence to push non-African origin theories. Only later in the 20th century did archaeologists like Gertrude Catton Thompson in 1929 firmly establish that Great Zimbabwe was built by African ancestors of the Shona, which is now universally accepted by scholars. But during the colonial period of Rhodesia, the true history was suppressed. The colonial government didn't want the African population drawing pride and nationalist sentiment from a majestic pre-colonial past. It wasn't until Zimbabwe's independence in 1980 that this heritage was fully embraced. The country even took its name from Great Zimbabwe, and the iconic Zimbabwe bird, stone-carved birds found at the site, possibly royal totems, became the national emblem. Visiting Great Zimbabwe today, one can wander freely through the hill complex, squeezing between stone passageways that once were walked by kings and priests a half-millennium ago. Then, descending to the valley, you approach the great enclosure. Standing before the curving wall, perfectly smooth and sloping, you feel small. It's like standing at the base of an ancient fortress, yet there's an elegance to it, with a chevron pattern decoration in parts, and the mystery of that looming conical tower within. Birds chirp in the nearby fig trees. Occasionally a troop of baboons might scamper across the ruins, as if they too are heirs to this place. It's a peaceful scene now, belying the fact that at its zenith, this was a bustling urban center, with smoke from 1,000 cooking fires rising each morning, and drums sounding from the hill at sunset. At twilight, the stone walls take on a golden hue in the angled light. You might sit on a rock and listen to the silence. Perhaps, if fortunate, you catch the distant song of a Shona elder who sometimes visits to honor ancestors, or simply the wind whistling through the grasses growing atop the walls. Great Zimbabwe's structures have no roof now. Open to the sky, they feel almost like natural features of the landscape, as if grown from the earth itself. Yet they are undeniably the work of human hands, who loved, labored, traded, and worshipped here. The people left, moving north to found new states, or dispersing into smaller communities, but Great Zimbabwe remained, slowly emptying of life until only the stones and legends were left. Now, the site stands not as a ruin of shame, but as a proud testament. Zimbabweans today view it as a source of inspiration, proof that their forebears had civilization and prowess. The silence of Great Zimbabwe at night is not emptiness, but fullness. It is filled with the spirit of a culture that, while changed, is not lost. The Shona people living around still perform ceremonies at nearby sacred sites, and you can sense continuity. As darkness falls, you might recall a line from a visitor long ago who marveled at the marvelous size of these stones with no mortar joining them, or reflect on how for centuries outsiders denied the true makers of this city. But the stones remember, and now we too remember correctly. This was an African city, vibrant and sophisticated. From the highlands of Zimbabwe, we travel to one final destination in our journey of lost civilizations. We cross the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean to a tiny speck of land, one of the most isolated inhabited places on Earth. Rapa Nui, also known as Easter Island. There, an extraordinary culture arose, famous for its colossal stone statues, the moai. And there, in isolation, it declined under ecological and societal pressures. Our last echo is a cautionary tale from a remote island, where we contemplate the rise and fall of a people who touched the sky with their statues, before nearly fading away. Far out in the southeastern Pacific, over 2,000 miles from the nearest continental land, lies Rapa Nui, Easter Island, a triangular island of volcanic peaks, grasslands, and along the coast, astonishing statues that have captivated the world. These statues, or moai, are monolithic human figures carved from hardened volcanic ash, tough in the island's central quarry of Nuragic, ranging in height from a few meters to as tall as 10 meters or more. The largest erected moai is about 10 millimeters and over 80 tons. The moai feature oversized heads with brooding expressions, torso up to the hips, and some once wore massive cylindrical top knots of red scoria stone, pukao on their heads. The site of the moai, often lined up on ceremonial platforms called ahu facing inland, is mesmerizing. They stand as stone guardians of an empty island landscape, remnants of a society's devotions and achievements. The Polynesian ancestors of the Rapa Nui arrived on the island around 800–1200 AD. Scholars debate the exact timing, but evidence suggests settlement by around the 12th century and established a thriving culture. Despite extremely limited resources, no permanent streams, limited fresh water, a small variety of plants and animals, they managed to farm sweet potatoes, taro, yams, and raise chickens, and from the ocean they fished. Over time, the population grew, possibly reaching a peak of 7,000–15,000 people by the 15th–17th centuries. They organized into clans, each with its own chief, and these clans were likely in competition, especially in terms of constructing bigger and more moai to honor their ancestors. The moai, it is believed, represented deified ancestors or important chiefs. Raising a moai on an ahu would spiritually watch over and bless the local community. Carving and transporting these giant statues was a Herculean task for a pre-metal Stone Age society. The Rapa Nui used only stone tools, basalt picks called toki, to carve the moai from the quarry face. Then they somehow moved them many kilometers to the coast. The leading theory is that they used a combination of log rollers, sleds, and ropes, or possibly a walking method where they rocked the statues forward with ropes. Both scenarios have tremendous implications. They required timber for rollers or rope tension, rope, which came from plant fibers likely of the haikau tree, and a lot of coordinated manpower, fed by surplus food. All these needs put stress on the environment. Easter Island originally had extensive forests of palm trees, including a now extinct giant palm. Pollen records show that by around 1400 AD, these forests were largely gone. The causes likely included intentional clearing for agriculture, use of wood in moving moai, and also the introduction of Polynesian rats, which may have devoured seeds and prevented regrowth. As tree cover vanished, soil eroded and crop yields would decline. Furthermore, the loss of large trees meant no more seaworthy canoes, thus less fishing. Only small reed skiffs remained. Fresh water sources could have been affected. Less forest means quicker runoff and dry soil. In essence, the Rapa Nui may have overshot their ecosystem's carrying capacity, a scenario often termed ecocide, ecological suicide, in popular narratives, although recent research complicates it by suggesting they showed resilience and farming adaptation, like lithic mulching, using rocks to protect soil. As resources dwindled, internal strife likely increased. The later period of Rapa Nui's pre-contact history is thought to have been marked by clan warfare. Oral traditions speak of bloody conflicts, even cannibalism in times of extreme famine. The moai, once standing proudly, were mostly toppled, presumably by rival groups pushing over each other's statues to desecrate and humiliate. And by the time the first recorded European Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen arrived on Easter Sunday 1722, hence the name Easter Island, the society he encountered was a shadow of its former self. Roggeveen described the people as subsisting, not thriving. He saw some moai still standing and was impressed by them, but also signs of societal decay. In subsequent visits, Spaniards in 1770, Captain Cook in 1774, observers noted that many moai were fallen by then. Cook described a people who were impoverished and fewer in number. Thus, long before Europeans enforced any rule, Rapa Nui had suffered a societal collapse. The population crashed. By European contact, it might have been a few thousand. The monuments were abandoned, and the social order, with hereditary chiefs and priests, had given way to survival mode. A new cult, the Tangata Man Nu, or Birdman cult, emerged, focusing not on moai, but an annual competition to collect the first egg of the sooty tern from an offshore islet, reflecting a shift in religion and social structure, perhaps a response to the old system's failure. Then, cruelly, external contact brought further woes. In the 1800s, Peruvian slave raids seized a large portion of the remaining population, and diseases like smallpox and tuberculosis decimated the rest. By 1877, only 111 Rapa Nui people were left alive on the island. They lost much of their culture, The once written script Rongorongo remains undeciphered and was likely a casualty of these upheavals. And yet, the people survived. Today, around 7,000 Rapa Nui, with mixed heritage, live on the island, part of Chile, and they have revived elements of their culture, preserving language, arts, and proudly maintaining the Moai for World Heritage and as a link to their ancestors. The Moai have been re-erected on summer home for tourism and cultural pride, but many remain where they fell, half buried and gazing at the sky from the ground, as if awaiting some long overdue salvation, or simply witnessing nature's slow healing of the land. To stand on the windswept plains of Rapa Nui at dawn, facing a lineup of Moai at Ahu Tongariki, 15 Moai standing after restoration, is to feel the weight of both the brilliance and folly of the island's history. The Moai, backlit by the rising sun, cast long shadows toward you, their faces impassive. They survived the collapse of the society that birthed them, and now outlast the people's sorrows, emblematic of resilience and warning. The endless ocean surrounds the island, a reminder of how isolated the Rapa Nui were. Their world was literally just this bit of earth and stone. When night falls, Rapa Nui's sky is brilliant with stars, no light pollution. The Moai stand in silhouette against the cosmos. It's easy to imagine them as sentinels, guarding the spirits of the ancestors in the darkness. In those quiet hours, one can contemplate what the collapse of Rapa Nui means. It's a story of human determination and ingenuity, but also of vulnerability. The Rapa Nui achieved remarkable feats, yet small mistakes or just sheer bad luck with resources led to calamity. It's a microcosm that has often been taken as a cautionary tale for our entire planet, an island in space. But beyond the caution, there is also hope in the Rapa Nui story. The people did not entirely disappear. They endured, adapted new cultural forms, the Birdman cult, and today strive to restore what was lost. The Moai that fell have been raised again, not to its original religious purpose, but as a testament that the culture lives on, transformed but unbroken. As our journey ends here on Rapa Nui, we find a poignant symmetry. We started with vanished civilizations on the continental mainlands, and ended with one at the far edge of the world. In all these tales, Anasazi, Indus, Olmec, Nabatean, Sea Peoples, Hittite, Aksumite, Minoan, Mycenaean, Göbekli Tepe, Khmer, Cahokian, Nuragic, Great Zimbabwean, and Rapa Nui. We have seen that to rise and fall is the common story of civilizations. Yet, in a way, none are ever completely gone. The Anasazi live in the pueblos of their descendants. The Indus legacy threads into later Indian culture. The Olmecs gave birth to Mesoamerican traditions. The Nabatean city still stands in stone. The Hittites' treaties and laws influence successors. Aksum's conversion left an enduring Ethiopian church. The Minoans and Mycenaeans seeded classical Greece through myth and memory. The builders of Göbekli Tepe sparked perhaps the agricultural revolution. The Khmer's temples still inspire Cambodian identity. The Mississippian mound builders' blood runs in many Native Americans. The Sardinian Nuragi may well be ancestors of Sardinia's enduring folkways. Great Zimbabwe's very name is reborn as a modern nation, and the Rapa Nui, though nearly extinguished, continue to sing their ancient songs under the gaze of their moa. In the end, as we let the gentle, immersive quiet of these reflections lull us, we might feel a connection to all those who came before. The stars above Rapa Nui, or above any of these ancient sites, are the same stars that shone on the hopeful beginnings and somber endings of lost civilizations. Under this shared sky, their mysteries invite our curiosity, their achievements command our respect, and their downfalls kindle our humility and caution. Drifting into sleep, we carry with us the dreamlike echoes of vanished foundations, collapsed stones, and last echoes, knowing that through remembering them, in some sense, they live again in our minds.